All right, I'm going to talk about TikTok in this one, the current state of TikTok, the TikTok ban, that legislation, the sale of TikTok. First of all, the sale of TikTok is nothing more than a vehicle for just absolute corruption and self enrichment of Trump's cronies. The Murdochs, the Ellison family, Mark Andreessen, they're going to they're going to own 80% of the company and make 80% of the profits. But China and ByteDance are still going to own 20% of the company. They're still going to control the algorithm that drives TikTok. All of them are going to have access to all of our data. But focusing on China is still going to own 20% of TikTok. That's about what they owned before. And China and ByteDance are still going to control the algorithm and have access to all of our data. What was the point of the TikTok ban legislation? To prevent exactly that. And reading from an article in the Washington Post, Trump turns Biden's TikTok law into big win. Wow. That headline is doing some heavy lifting. It could be Trump corruption and desire to benefit his wealthy friends is completely out of control in the TikTok deal, which still gives all of our data and control of TikTok to China. How about that? When President Joe Biden signed a law last year forcing the sale of TikTok, top Democrats and China hawks heralded it as a triumph. Slightly disingenuous. That law was passed by massive bipartisan margins in the House and the Senate. Why did that happen? That legislation was passed in March of 2024. Why would that happen in March of 2024? Because what happened in Israel on October 7th, 2023? Right. And then immediately following that, all of us on TikTok started getting all kinds of videos from Palestinian civilians inside the Gaza Strip showing what the Israeli military was doing inside the Gaza Strip. Jonathan Greenblatt from the Anti-Defamation League was recorded on a conference call speaking of Israel and all of that stuff. He obviously is a staunch defender of Israel and Zionism and what the Israeli military and Israeli government are doing inside the Gaza Strip to Palestinian civilians. He said on a conference call, "We have a TikTok problem. We have a generational problem." It was his position and Israel government and military's position that TikTok and the fact that people who use TikTok could see videos of what the Israeli military was doing inside the Gaza Strip. He said, we have a generational problem because TikTok and those videos are turning the younger generations of America and around the planet against Israel because Israel was conducting a genocide. Funny how that happens. When you conduct a genocide live on the internet that people can watch every day, it's going to have a negative impact on people's opinions of your country and your military. And that's exactly what was happening. So Jonathan Greenblatt got together with AIPAC and they spent probably $1 billion, I don't know, I'm making that number up, buying off Republican and Democratic members of Congress so that they could push this TikTok ban legislation through under the guise of China and national security and protecting the data of Americans. And Joe Biden, being the wildly pro-Zionist president that he was, he signed that legislation knowing full well that it was a fucking ruse, that China being listed as the reason was a fucking ruse. That TikTok ban was what Jonathan Greenblatt at the Anti-Defamation League wanted. That TikTok ban legislation was what AIPAC wanted. That TikTok ban was what Bibi Netanyahu and the Israeli military and the Israeli government wanted. Bibi Netanyahu and the Israeli military, who have killed more journalists in 2 years inside the Gaza Strip than just about every other war combined in the last century. They are killing the witnesses to their war crimes, journalists inside the Gaza Strip. So now we get this fucking TikTok sale, which leaves China owning pretty much the same amount proportion of TikTok that they owned before, and ByteDance will still control the algorithm, and they will still have access to all of our data. The only thing that's going to be different is now a bunch of Donald Trump's friends get wealthy off of this deal, and they get access to all of our data too. Anyway, from the article again. 4 years earlier, Donald Trump tried and failed during his first term in the White House to push through a similar measure, TikTok ban legislation. But the Biden administration worked aggressively with Congress to craft a law officials said would sever all risks of political influence from China, where TikTok's owner, ByteDance, is based. Now, some critics of an extraordinary deal to spin off a U.S. version of TikTok say that that effort has backfired. The app's recommendation algorithm will remain in ByteDance's hands, China, under the proposal, undermining one of the Biden team's central justifications for the law. That was also, again, Biden didn't write the fucking law. Congress did. Well, AIPAC did, and the ADL did, but Congress passed it, and then it got to Biden. TikTok's new owners are likely to include corporate interests tied to some of Trump's most prominent backers, including Larry Ellison, Jeff Yass, billionaire donor who owns a huge part of TikTok USA, and Rupert Murdoch and Mark Andreessen, who some fear could exert their own political influence over the app. Larry Ellison, his son owns Skydance, which just merged with Paramount, so they now own Paramount and CBS. They're putting an Israeli propagandist named Barry Weiss of the Free Press in charge of CBS News, and they're trying to buy Time Warner. So just the Ellison family is buying up huge swaths of American media. Sinclair and Nexstar, who are firmly in the Trump column, combined owned about 80% of local TV stations around the United States. You know, we're seeing them correct in real time a mistake that Trump and his cronies did not do during Trump's first term, which is seize control of almost all American media and put it all in the MAGA column, including TikTok. Except it's still 20% owned by China, and the algorithm will be controlled by China, and our data will be being harvested by China. All things that the TikTok ban legislation deems to be illegal. So this whole deal is fucking illegal. But who cares anymore, right? What are laws anyway?